Hey, Fix-It Tony here. Today I'm going to replace this light fixture with a new light fixture. This one works, but I'm just changing the design. And to begin, removing the old light fixture, make sure you remove the light bulb, which I already did. The light fixture is turned off at the switch. When you do a light fixture, generally speaking, you don't have to turn off the power at the circuit breaker or the panel box, generally because the light fixture is only going to be carrying power. Sometimes they will supply power to it, but we're only going to be doing a very simple swap out. So we're only going to be touching the wire nuts inside the box that are relevant to the light fixture. So that means a white wire, a black wire, and a ground wire. If this is existing construction, you don't have to worry about feeding new wires. It's just making sure you find the connections to the existing light fixture like I did here. So I'll just be removing these. First off is remove the wire nuts. Now, I'm still not going to touch those wires until I confirm for sure, but the light wasn't working, so it's pretty obvious that there's no electricity in the unit. I'm going to do a quick comparison of wire nuts. So this is the wire nut I'm going to use. I got from my stash. This diameter is about the same as that diameter, and so you could use these. So it's important not to only look at the color of the wire nuts. Generally speaking, you would think that the yellow means for two 12-gauge wires, three 12-gauge wires, or 2, 3, 4 14-gauge wires. And orange is usually for 18-gauge and 14-gauge. But sometimes but you can see how the sizes are different. So always take a look before you use a wire nut to the diameter. The diameter of that spring in there is going to be more important than the color. So you want to have a smaller diameter because we're going to be connecting a 14-gauge wire to a very thin, maybe even 18-gauge on the light fixture itself. So it's very thin, two very thin wires. You need a properly sized wire nut. So that's important to keep in mind. It's always important to get into a habit of checking for live electricity. Even though it's turned off at the switch, you always want to make sure that it's off. So no power, so I'm good. The next thing we're going to need to do, the new light fixture has a different mounting plate than the old fixture. So I'm going to remove this piece right here. I don't need this piece anymore. But I will need to keep these screws. These screws are going into the box, the junction box, and I need to have these screws for the new plate. So I will begin to remove these screws. You never know what you're going to find, so always be prepared to have the right tools handy. In this instance, one screw is a square drive or Robertson head screw, and the other one is a Phillips head screw. Now I can certainly bring my cordless screwdriver and do this quicker, but I wanted to also illustrate that basic hand tools can get the job done as well. oh, look at that. As I was manipulating the ground wire, it popped out completely from its wire nut. That tells me this was not secure enough. Very interesting. So this was loose. I'm going to make sure all these are tight as well before I put on my new bracket. All right. Now you should be able to tighten these just by hand only, and to know whether or not it's tight enough, you should be able to pull without actually removing the cap. See, I was able to pull that off, so I know that this was not properly installed by the builder or by a licensed electrician that was hired by the builder of this house. So even though you have a highly paid electrician, I'm going to take a look to see here. See, they didn't twist this. They just put the wires together and twisted it. So that's not optimal. So I'll show you what we need to do there. When you are connecting wires together, what we have here is wire that's feeding electricity from the switch. There's a second black wire, which is going to be taking electricity to the other light fixture. And the third is what we call a pigtail, which is a short piece of wire that will connect directly to this current light fixture. So the way that you're supposed to connect wires is you're supposed to twist them together. All right. You use lineman pliers like this. They have a nice flat, broad biting surface and some teeth that allows you to grip the wires and twist. I'm also holding the wires down here so that these wires don't twist. I only want to twist the tip. All right, so now I have a connector that's got a little bigger spring opening because I'm connecting 3 14 gauge wires together. This is the right connector size. So you can see how it's definitely getting much tougher. Now I can certainly overdo this and it'll basically break the spring from the plastic housing and then this will just pop off. So you have to be careful not to over torque it, and that's tight. And then now I can tuck this with confidence that there's no loose connection in there. Now, even though this is pretty tight, I'm pretty confident in this one. All right, that's good. Generally speaking, you want to put the ground in the back of the box first, as a matter of convention. When you have two different lengths, you have to bring those two lengths together, these two wires together to get an even length. I straightened up this wire, and I'm going to bring these three together. So you see how that's working. And then, am I still recording? Yep. Just had to double check to make sure I was still recording. Bring the three wires together. Grip down below. I'm gripping about a 1/4 inch or less in. And I'm just sort of twisting each one to create a rope-like twist. And when I think I got it, I'll do one final twist there. So if if the Moret connector ever were to come off, at least these are making a connection. And then tighten the nut. The other thing you want to look out for is when this wire nut is tightened all the way down and you're in the final resting place, you don't want to see any exposed copper wire. If you do, that's a risk of this bare wire on either the neutral, the return wire, or the black power wire making contact with ground or something in the box, creating a short and blowing a fuse or tripping a breaker. So you always want to make sure you're not having any exposed copper in this area. And then I'm going to tuck my ground in first, and then I'm going to tuck my power line, and then I bring in my return white wire, pushing it in, and my 3 wires are now coming out of the center of the box. And the reason for that is I have my new plate. Just look at the manual of your new light fixture to know what orientation. This particular light fixture, I have 2 small set screws that will come in from the side. So I need to make sure that these holes are horizontal. Fish the wire through the center of the fixture, and I'll get a level to make sure that that's level. But first I'm going to start with my screws. These mounting plates will have multiple concentric rings of slotted holes. So it's just a matter of finding the hole that matches best. Now sometimes these mounting screws, doesn't have a very large head, and sometimes the punching of the holes in this mounting bracket is too big. So you may or may not need a washer. You could preventatively add a small washer. I could do that, but I think by the looks of it, I'll have a good contact. Once you get this somewhat tightened, get a torpedo level. Now that I have the torpedo level, I can finish tightening it. There we go. Nice and tight. The next step is this bracket calls for a grounding screw, and this will ground if the light fixture ever got a short in it, at least the box and the ground, the light fixture is grounded. So not a bad thing to do. Fortunately, this did come with a grounding screw. A grounding screw is just a green screw with a large head. This has little teeth in it and will go into the hole provided by the manufacturer. Usually ground screws have a hex head, a star. This has a slot-headed screw drive in it. I don't want to use slot-headed. I'm going to use a 1/4-inch drive for ease. So I'm going to start the screw first. What happens is sometimes painters will paint the copper wire because they use an airless sprayer, and paint gets everywhere on all the wiring. You can tell this one's got paint on it too, the black wire. You want to have exposed copper wire when you're working with connectors and ground screws. So I cleaned off the paint off of the screw and wrapped it around. And then I'm going to tighten this down. And then, okay, so now I'm ready for the light fixture. What I'm doing is pre-curling the wire so I know how it's going to go back into this hole. So here's the light fixture. It can be mounted up like this, or it can be mounted down. Now, I'm on a staircase. My other fixture that's identical to this is mounted down, so I can light the staircase, and the lens will provide the ambient lighting. So first things first, as a matter of convention, it's always good practice to do the ground. You wrap the wire and get the stranded wire to the very tip or the end of the tip of the copper wire. Reaching into my pocket, get my marette. In Canada, we call them marettes, but now here in the US, they're called wire nuts. So I still sometimes will throw out the synonym marette connector. All right, and that's often enough to hold the fixture in place. Sometimes the fixtures are too heavy for you to hang the fixture from one of the wire nuts. Remember, you don't want to have any exposed copper wire, so this is the right length. Finger tight, pull, doesn't pull out, then you know it's good. Sometimes the wire gets twisted onto itself from the prior installation, so sometimes you want to straighten the wire. Bring the stranded wire, which is a skinnier one, close to the tip so that when it engages the spring, you have maximum twisting and connectivity. As I'm twisting, I'm pushing down at the same time. It's not just turning it like a nut, but you have to apply a little bit of downward pressure as you're twisting. Pull test. So now I'm going to get my two little set screws. As you're preparing to mount this, it's good practice to set all your connectors back into the junction box. Now every light fixture will have its own unique mounting system and system to secure the diffuser or the lens to the actual fixture. This particular unit has sort of like a washer and a nut that will go from the inside. So the light bulbs that I'm using are LED light bulbs. Now, I prefer a 2700 Kelvin color or temperature. It's more of a soft white. It's just the way we like our lighting. And this is shooting 800 lumens, which is more than what the other light fixture we had in place. There we go. Thank you very much for watching this video on how to install a light fixture, and hope you found some of the tips here helpful. Thank you very much. If this is your first time visiting, please hit the subscribe button. If you've been a subscriber, thank you again for watching another video. I really appreciate it, and I hope these help you. Happy New Year.